Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a topic that feels, well, plucked straight from the headlines. The US-China trade war. It sounds maybe like something out of a textbook, but our sources reveal it's packed with surprising personal history, clever economic strategies, and even, yeah, a dash of absurdity.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how deeply intertwined these things become.
Yeah.
Personal experiences, economic theory, geopolitical strategy. Our mission today is really to cut through the noise, understand the underlying motivations, and see how these actions ripple across the global economy.
Right, affecting everything from your luxury goods to the parts in your phone.
You might actually be surprised by what we uncover.
We have a fascinating stack of sources, including excerpts from Trump's trade wars and China's economic strategy that shed light on why this all started and, how it's playing out. Get ready for some major insights. So here's where it gets really interesting. Our sources suggest that former U.S. President Trump's intense stance on China might not just be about policy. It could be rooted in a personal business experience from way back in 2008.
It's quite remarkable, isn't it, how much an individual's past can impact international relations. We learned that in 2008, during that severe U.S. recession, banks weren't lending, credit was tight, and Trump, who was a real estate businessman then, he looked overseas for expansion.
Mm-hmm.
He identified China, particularly cities like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Fujian, Hunan, and Beijing as well, booming real estate markets, potential opportunities.
Yeah, and he tried to invest heavily. Luxury apartments in Guangzhou specifically, submitting a staggering 130 applications.
130, that's a lot.
It is, but every single one was rejected by the Chinese government.
Under then President Hu Jintao and Premier Wen Jiabao, yeah.
Talk about a cold shoulder.
Well, exactly. And this rejection, the sources seem to indicate, appears to have deeply offended him. The material directly links this specific business setback to his later political platform against China.
Really?
Yeah, citing his post-election accusations about, the COVID-19 origin, allegations of China bribing organizations like the WTO and WHO. It strongly suggests a very personal driver, maybe alongside policy, but a personal one, behind what became this huge trade conflict.
Wow. Okay, so we hear a lot about tariffs, but maybe we can dig a bit deeper. What exactly are they, strategically speaking? Why do countries use them?
Right. Fundamentally, sure, a tariff is a tax on imported goods
Mm-hmm.
designed to make foreign products more expensive. That's the basic definition.
Mm-hmm.
But strategically, tariffs serve usually two primary purposes. One, to protect and boost domestic industries, import substitution, basically.
Yeah.
And two, to prevent dumping, where cheaply priced foreign goods flood the local market and just undercut everyone.
Okay, think about it like this, maybe. If India didn't put that huge, like 100% tariff on Elon Musk's Tesla cars, maybe local companies like Mahindra and Tata might struggle to compete price-wise.
Exactly.
But if Tesla builds a plant in India, the tariff drops significantly, maybe to 30%.
Right. So it encourages local job creation, local manufacturing. It's a strategic lever.
Strategic move, yeah.
And another compelling example our sources give is the U.S. soybean market versus Indian farmers. Without tariffs on those cheaper U.S. soybeans, Indian farmers might really struggle to sell their produce. They might even abandon soybean cultivation altogether. And over time, that could make India dependent on foreign imports for a key commodity.
That makes sense.
The sources even kind of attribute India's lack of a domestic aircraft manufacturing industry, historically, to low tariffs on imported planes. So it really highlights how tariffs, or the lack of them, can shape an entire nation's industrial landscape, long term.
Okay, so armed with this understanding of tariffs, let's look at how Trump actually deployed them. Our sources describe him reading from a teleprompter, announcing tariffs. Well, madly is the word used on various countries. He imposed a 26% tariff on India, for instance, but ramped it up significantly against China, reaching as high as 245%.
Which is, an enormous figure. And what's fascinating here is the sheer audacity, the breadth of it. The sources even mention this almost comical tariff on the herd in McDonald Islands near Australia.
Where the only inhabitants are penguins and seals.
Exactly. Penguins, seals, maybe some polar bears, depending on the source. It just underscores the broad, almost indiscriminate nature of the initial approach. But China was clearly the main target, even being referred to as father of corona in some of the rhetoric, which is, Quite something.
Wow.
And China, of course, retaliated. Reciprocal tariffs. Things escalated.
But the U.S. did have some strong cards to play initially, didn't it? Our sources point to America's huge agricultural capacity.
Oh, absolutely. America's vast, fertile land allows it to produce enormous amounts of corn and soybeans.
Which China really needs.
Desperately needs.
Yeah.
China has this massive pork industry, right? 400 million pigs. They need something like 50 million tons of soybeans and 100 million tons of corn annually. A lot of that traditionally came from the U.S.
So if China taxes those imports...
It directly raises the cost of pork, their staple meat. That creates real domestic pressure.
Okay, that's leverage. What else?
Another key U.S. advantage highlighted is technology, specifically NVIDIA's monopoly, or near monopoly, on the H20 AI chip.
The AI chip.
Yeah, this is critical for China's AI development, things like their DeepSeek platform.
Yeah.
They need these high-performance chips.
Yeah.
So the U.S. restricting these exports, that was a direct hit to China's tech ambitions, a real bottleneck.
So the U.S. certainly landed some punches, but China wasn't just, taking them on the chin. Our sources explain how China started fighting back with its own economic war.
Right, hitting back hard and, importantly, strategically. And this is where you start to see that sort of boomerang effect of tariffs.
How so?
Well, for the U.S., think about its expensive healthcare system. It relies heavily on cheaper, generic medicines from China. Tariffs make those pricier. Same for things like leather goods, clothing. Basic consumer goods get more expensive for Americans. And even more significantly, China holds a near monopoly on so many electronic items. Drones, cameras, mobiles, laptops.
Stuff we use every day.
Exactly. Tariffs on those lead directly to inflation within the U.S. It hits consumers right in the wallet.
And then there's that huge move with Boeing.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one.
Yeah.
China canceled an order for 179 Boeing aircraft.
Ouch. Billions in losses for Boeing.
Billions for the company, and significant lost tax revenue for the U.S. government, too. And China immediately shifted towards European Airbus. Plus, they're rapidly developing their own commercial aircraft, the C919.
Right, I read about that.
Alongside Russia's MC-21. It signals a very clear move towards self-reliance, away from dependence on U.S. aerospace.
So China definitely pushed back. What were its main strategic advantages in this economic fight?
Okay, the sources highlight several key ones. First, rare earth metals. This is huge. China controls maybe 70–80% of the world's supply. And these metals are absolutely crucial for advanced military tech.
Like what?
Missiles, radar systems, the F-35 and F-22 fighter jets, even supercomputers used for things like predicting cyclones and tsunamis.
So really critical stuff.
Absolutely critical. And China threatened to restrict these exports, not just to the U.S., but globally, to prevent re-export back to the U.S. That's serious leverage.
Okay, what else?
Second, silicon and graphite. China also holds monopolies or near monopolies in these. Silicon is vital for all electronics. IC chips, computer cores.
The foundation.
The foundation, exactly. And graphite is used in lubricants, nuclear power, batteries. Again, essential materials.
Got it. Any other?
Then there's RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
Oh.
The sources call this China's Brahmastra.
Their ultimate weapon.
Kind of, yeah. It's a massive free trade agreement between 15 countries. Japan, South Korea, Australia, all the ASEAN nations.
How does that help them bypass U.S. tariffs?
Well, China can export goods tariff-free to another RCEP member, let's say Indonesia or Australia. And from there, those goods can potentially be re-exported to the U.S., possibly facing lower tariffs than if they came directly from China. It's a way to circumvent the direct hit.
Clever.
Very. And finally, social media leverage. Using platforms like TikTok, which isn't banned in the U.S. like it is in India, they apparently used it to expose huge markups on luxury goods. Showing items made cheaply in China then sold for exorbitant prices by brands like Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton.
Highlighting the made-in-China reality behind the luxury price tag.
Precisely. They even, according to the sources, highlighted a White House spokesperson wearing Chinese-made clothes while advocating a boycott.
Oh, the irony.
And showed Boycott China t-shirts being printed in China. It powerfully underscored China's position as this indispensable manufacturing hub, cheap, disciplined, skilled labor. Hard to replace.
So it sounds like, in a way, these tariffs actually backfired on the U.S. and maybe even fueled China's manufacturing.
That's what the sources suggest, yes. That Trump's tariffs led Chinese factories to work, day and night, boosting production, boosting GDP, boosting their growth rate.
Yeah.
China's strategy also included dumping, selling goods cheaply abroad, sometimes below cost, just to maintain market share. And they seemed willing to accept large trade deficits.
Like with India.
Exactly. India faces this huge trade deficit with China, importing around $113 billion, exporting only $14 billion. That's massive. And the sources suggest this deficit could even worsen for India, because U.S. companies facing high tariffs on Chinese goods might just import those goods from India instead.
Turning India into a kind of middleman.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
A re-export hub for Chinese products,
Yeah.
indirectly feeding the U.S. market while worsening India's own trade balance with China. It gets complicated.
Definitely complicated. And this trade war isn't just U.S.-China, is it? It has these profound global ripple effects, like the China plus one strategy we hear about.
Right, that's a direct consequence. Companies worldwide are now actively looking to diversify their manufacturing, to move some production out of China,
To reduce risk.
to reduce supply chain risks, reduce dependency, and this creates a huge opportunity for countries like India, Vietnam, Mexico, places with inexpensive labor, maybe large domestic markets.
But it's not easy, right? Setting up whole new supply chains.
No, it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
Retraining workforces, navigating new regulations. It's a complex, long-term shift for global business.
And our sources also touch on this intriguing geopolitical angle between Trump, Putin, and China. Trump apparently tried to dilute the Ukraine war to keep Russia and China from getting too close.
Yeah, that's a fascinating strategic point raised in the material. The idea being that the U.S. wanted to manage the Ukraine conflict carefully to prevent Russia, with its energy and military clout, from becoming an even tighter, more dependent strategic partner for China.
Because a stronger Sino-Russian alliance would be bad news for the U.S., especially during a trade war.
Exactly. It would create a much more formidable economic and geopolitical bloc. It's a reminder that international relations is this multi-dimensional chessboard, not just economics, but also about preventing adversarial alliances.
Okay, but then our sources voice this other suspicion, that maybe there were even deeper motivations behind Trump's tariff moves, like potentially manipulating the stock market.
Right, this is definitely more speculative territory, but the sources do explore this theory. It highlights the, complex interplay between political announcements and market reactions. The alleged pattern goes something like this. Announce tariffs, market drops. Then, theoretically, buy stocks cheap. Then announce a 90-day grace period or some kind of exemption. Market tends to rise on that news, then sell high.
Creating an artificial boom and bust cycle.
That's the theory. The sources use this vivid analogy.
The cremation ground one.
Yeah. Spread a rumor about a cremation ground opening nearby to crash land prices. Buy the land cheap.
Then cancel the rumor.
Prices recover. Then sell the land at a huge profit. Maybe even give a celebrity a free plot nearby to make the surrounding land seem even more desirable and sell that at inflated prices.
So it's all about perception and manipulating value, not necessarily fundamentals.
Precisely. It underscores how market value can be really sensitive to perceived future possibilities, to policy signals, not just underlying economic health.